Welcome to Biblios, the space where we think about biblical thinking. Today we have with us Dr. Paulien, who's the Dean for the School of Religion at Loma Linda University. Dr. Paulien, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you.
Dr. Paulien, you have studied the Bible all your life as both a pastor and a theologian. Why do you do it, and what makes this book relevant to us today?
I know some people probably think I'm a little weird, but really it all started as a child. I was interested in the Bible right from the beginning, and so perhaps the weirdness started very early. But as I continued studying it, as I became a scholar, and as I began looking at the Greek and the Hebrew and the Aramaic, an amazing thing happened. The Bible changed my life. And in changing my life, it came to realize it's more than just an academic exercise. This book actually can make a difference in the world. And for that reason, I rejoice in it even now at a later age. And I'm glad that I went the direction that I did.
Some people would say that Shakespeare changed their life. Is it a different way in which the Bible changed your life, or is it something like Shakespeare that you just read it so much that you've fallen in love with it?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think it's possible for Shakespeare to change someone's life. And I think Shakespeare is full of a lot of very important things, a lot of true things. He was a very keen observer of human nature. So very deeply psychological, among other things. So yeah, I would not refute such a claim. What Shakespeare doesn't claim is that his writing is a revelation of God. It's a revelation of a very keen human observer of human nature. What the Bible is it claims to be a revelation from a God who made us, a God who has a purpose for our lives, who actually made us in his image. And if that is true, and I leave that for the viewers to decide, but if that is true, the Bible might be able to change our lives in a way that truly makes a difference, that can enable us to cope in a dark world and to truly have lives that have a different kind of purpose than what most people experience.
So after studying it for your whole life, why do you think that revelation has become accessible to you, but is so inaccessible to some other people?
Well, unfortunately, one of the realities of history, there are people who have read the Bible, people who have claimed to follow the Bible, who have done a lot of destruction in this world. You think of the Crusades and the Inquisition and the Salem witch trials and many such things. There's no question that people claiming to follow the God of the Bible, claiming to be driven by the Bible, have done a lot of destructive things. So I can understand why people in today's world maybe don't think that the Bible is something that they want to pursue. But I think those who have studied the Bible as scholars have discovered that often people have misread the Bible, misinterpreted God, and sought to use God for their own purposes, for power and wealth in this world. And I think a scholarly study of the Bible can safeguard us against misusing it, so that if it truly is a revelation of God, we want to study it as accurately as we can.
One of the things with the Bible is that, at the end of the day, although translated into many different languages, essentially what we have here is an ancient text written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. And today we're in a 21st century world. How do we marry the two? Can an ancient text speak to us today? Is it just a fact that the distance between the original text and us today means that it's going to be misinterpreted?
Well, let me tell you what the Bible, it seems, tells me about God. And I'll tell it through a story. It was about 1896, and at that time, people had discovered that the Greek language of the New Testament part of the Bible was totally unique in the ancient world. It didn't match up with the Greek of the philosophers. It didn't match up with the Greek of the government documents. It didn't match up with the Greek of the intelligent people of the world, the rich people of the world, the people who ran things back then. And that's, of course, the Greek that we would likely run into. But then in 1896, a scholar took a look at a garbage pile in Egypt. And in this part of Egypt, it was totally dry, so nothing decays. And he thought, I wonder if I get into this garbage pile, will I find some ancient documents? And he did. It was full of ancient documents, including some biblical texts. But more than that, it was full of personal letters. It was full of school texts. It was full of marriage contracts, legal documents. It was the language of the street. It was the language that everyday people used when they wrote to each other and when they did documents. And you know what they found out? It was the language of the New Testament. In other words, when God, I believe, chose to reveal himself to people in ancient times, he didn't use the language of the scholars, he didn't use the language of the philosophers or the language of government. He used the language of the common people, the people of the street. And this illustrates to me the point that in the Bible, God was meeting people where they are. And that means that God cares deeply to connect with people where they are. That means if the Bible is going to be significant for us today, the Bible needs to speak to people where they are today. And so it's the job of the scholar to, in a sense, read the Bible twice. First of all, to try to understand it within its time and place. And then second of all, to understand today's time and place so that we can make a connection between the two. One illustration of that is the four Gospels in the New Testament. The story of Jesus is told 4 times in 4 different ways. There was only one Jesus. There was only one life that was Jesus. And yet the story is told 4 different ways from people inspired by God. And that means that God recognizes people have a variety of different ways of thinking, a variety of different questions. And he gives us a variety of pictures of Jesus so that we can accept and appreciate these things for ourselves. That no matter where a person's come from, whatever language they study, the Bible can draw out a message about God for today's world as well. So the task of the Bible student is to first of all learn what the Bible's teaching, but then second of all make it real to today. And I think that's what this program is all about. It's taking the Bible in its ancient context and making it relevant to today's world.
So how would somebody who's not a scholar such as yourself do that?
How would they discover the original meaning of the text?
Yeah, how would they discover the original meaning of the text and then understand it in light of the world in which we're
that's a very interesting question. Obviously, the average person's not going to learn Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic. I think you've done a little bit of that.
I have.
So, yeah. So the average person isn't going to do that. But what I suggest is that they come to the Bible through a variety of translations. Now, the beauty of the English language is that there's probably 500 translations of the Bible into the English language. And so what I encourage people who don't know the original languages to do is get 4 or 5 of those translations. And when you compare a given text in, say, 5 translations, if all of the texts are identical, what would you know? Well, what would that mean to you? If you have 5 translations, they all say the same thing. What would that tell you about the original text?
That there's a uniformity in how it's
Okay, it's pretty clear.
expressed, yeah.
The original text is pretty clear. If all 5 translations say the same thing, it must be a clear text. And there you get a pretty clear idea of what the Bible's saying on that particular topic. If you take the 5 translations and each of them is different, what would you know?
The original text isn't pretty clear.
It's not clear. There's some ambiguities here. This is going to take some special study. Now, if people are trying to say, what is the Bible teaching? They want to know with clarity the Bible's message. They don't want to distort it like some religious people have in the past. Go with the clear text. Go with the texts that clearly teach what it's saying. And you can discover that by comparing translations. Now, suppose you have 5 translations and one of them says this and the other 4 say something else, what would that tell you?
Maybe look a little closely at the one that says something different.
Maybe the one that's different is a little biased. You know, translators may have their own bias. And if one is way off in left field and the other 4 are all saying the same things, perhaps that's the bias of that translation. Over time, people can pick up the biases of translations by comparing texts in this way. A second thing I would suggest is spend the majority of your time reading the Bible rather than, you know, just running from text to text. Because then the Bible writer's in control. The Bible writer helps you to see where he's going. The Bible writer puts one chapter in front of another. So by broad reading, by sticking to the clear texts, people can gradually get familiar with the biblical text and its original purpose. So that's what I suggest to people who aren't scholars. You can understand the Bible better than you think if you use a variety of translations and if you read. Now, if you read the Bible and you come to something very disturbing, what would you guys do?
I'd probably have to read around it as much as I possibly could just to see if I could grasp anything. And
read around it?
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, read more broadly in the context of,
Yeah.
because I'll tell you, if you read the Bible, spend a lot of time reading the Bible, you will find disturbing things. And then the question is, what does that tell us about God? If this is God's word, and there's disturbing things in the Bible, what would that tell us about God? What it tells me, it's a God who's not afraid of investigation. It's a God who's not afraid of laying out the evidence and the data. If God inspired people to put this book together, and it's got disturbing things in it, then God is not afraid to let us examine Him and examine how He relates to human beings.
I mean, thinking about all you've said, it's just really raised another question for me. We've talked about the original languages of the Bible. We've talked about different translations. To go through all that process, was the Bible ever meant to be easy to interpret?
Well, it depends on what kind of God we're dealing with. If God is truly what most people claim Him to be, if God is truly transcendent, truly great, way above where we are, then He really must be talking to 2-year-olds in the Bible. In other words, if God meets people where they are, He's reaching down to the human capacity. And if you think, you know, is God smarter than I am? I think you're going about 5 levels of smartness multiplied on steroids, you know, way more than anywhere that I might be. And so if God is that great, then in the Bible He's kind of talking to 2-year-olds. So God is almost feeling His way to reach out to us. So to think that casually we can just understand the Bible by spending a day, you know, a moment with it today and a moment with it tomorrow, that we can understand God, is perhaps overestimating our capacity to understand Him. In the Bible, He's really reaching out to children and trying to, you know, how do you reach out to children? You try a little thing here, a little thing there. They misunderstand you, so you try again. You see that happening in the Bible, and that's why there's disturbing things at times in the Bible.
Dr. Paulien, it's been wonderful having you with us today, thinking about biblical thinking. We invite you to join us next time. If you want more information on this episode, please join us on our Facebook page, our Twitter or our Instagram. We're happy to engage with you and discuss these things further.